Dateline, May 1, 2035. In a groundbreaking move, the Nepal government has raised Everest permit fees to $45,000 while offering drone-assisted human lift service to Camp 2 in the western Khumbu for an additional $20,000. But demand shows no sign of slowing, with over 2,000 climbers attempting the summit this season. Meanwhile, the garbage crisis seems to have been tackled by a new high-altitude trash-to-energy burning plant in Lobuche and a human waste plant that captures the methane to be used as fuel for porters working on the mountain. Of course, this news report, more than a decade in the future, about Mount Everest seems almost impossible to imagine. But are we really that far off? What does the future look like on Mount Everest and the 8,000-meter peaks? Things are changing quickly. For instance, the permit fees on Mount Everest alone have gone up $3,000 this year alone. The future of Mount Everest and the 8,000-meter peaks certainly holds some incredible potential. But what about the dark side of overt commercialization, overcrowding, and environmental impact? Today, we're going to look at the future of Mount Everest, changes that are happening, going almost out of control, and things the government of Nepal particularly is doing to remedy some of these situations, and some of the things they aren't doing to remedy the situation. Let's look at Everest's shift from exploration into tourism. As someone who has spent more than 20 years climbing and filming on the mountain and studying its mysteries as well, climbing Mount Everest symbolized something bigger than ourselves. It was the ultimate test of endurance, of the human spirit, of standing up against some of nature's greatest furies. But in a world driven by likes and selfies and instant gratification, has the meaning of Everest changed forever? Are there still pure alpinists out there? In an interview that I will link to in the description of this video, as it was said by one of the world's greatest mountaineers, Reinhold Messner. Messner states 90% of the people who go into mountaineering these days have nothing to do with traditional alpinism. What's happening on Everest is tourism.
The mountain is full of people. When I was there, our base camp was 20 by 20 meters. Now the base camp is 2 kilometers long. Yeah. It's a city. There are 1,500 tents in the base camp.
It appears that this explosion of activity on Mount Everest has changed the spirit of what Mount Everest stood for back in the day. It's become a status symbol, a fleeting moment of fame captured in a summit selfie. So instead of Everest being something about defining oneself, it's about conquering the algorithm. I hearken back to one of the most extreme cases where an individual attempted to do a backflip on the summit of Mount Everest, which, by the way, he didn't stick, claiming, though, that it was the highest ever backflip in the world. Truly a feat of exceptional athleticism, but shameful when one looks at what the original idea of getting to the top of the mountain was, where people revered the mountain itself and the people and the cultures around it.
I stopped maybe 10 feet short of the summit. I'm not sure if it's out of fear or respect, but I promised myself I would never step on the head of their god.
If I could, I want to jump in real quick. You know how much I value my time. With my busy schedule, I've been looking for ways to cut down on all the extra time it takes to cook, to go shopping, to actually do the cooking and then the cleaning. That's where Cook Unity comes in. Cook Unity delivers freshly prepared restaurant quality meals right to your door. Made by top chefs from across the country. Like this week, I've got barbecued salmon bento bowl and tofu forbidden rice bowl with miso peanut sauce. It looks amazing right out of the package, and the flavors, it's like eating at a restaurant in your own kitchen. Everything is fresh, responsibly sourced, and made with high quality ingredients, no junk. This is so good that it honestly feels chef-made, because it is. So whether you're vegan, gluten-free, paleo, keto, or a sometimes eats fish vegetarian like me, there's something for you. It saves us so much time during the week when we're busy. No meal prep, no dishes, and it's cheaper than ordering takeout or cooking for two. Right now, Cook Unity is offering all my viewers 50% off of their first order. Just click the link in the description below and use my code Everest50 to try it out for yourself. Thank you, Cook Unity, for sponsoring this video. Now let's look at the changing demographics of climbers. Messner has concerns about commercialization shared by many in the mountaineering community, reflected in a changing demographic of those who are actually attempting to climb Mount Everest. In the past, climbers were highly experienced mountain climbers who trained for years and years just to have the opportunity to become part of a mountaineering expedition. It wasn't a right to go climb Mount Everest. It was a privilege to be qualified and chosen to be a part of a climbing team on the mountain. And back then, it was also reflected in a very nationalistic type of pride. The Americans, or the Japanese, or the French, or the English. Today, many climbers join guided expeditions. Some of them have literally no experience whatsoever in the realm of mountaineering, have to be taught to put on crampons, how to use an ice axe, how to put one of these devices called the Jumar onto a rope, and shown how to slide it up the rope and climb up the mountain. They're taught right on the spot how to use the equipment, and they're hoping for the best, that shit doesn't hit the fan and the person that they're relying on isn't taken out of the scene, because many of these people would have no ability to extricate themselves from the mountain. Now, I want to inject in here that it's not necessarily good or bad. It doesn't make these people good or bad. It just shows the dramatic changes that are taking place on the mountain. The Everest chronicler Alan Arnett talks about how the number of Sherpa that are being assigned to clients on the mountain has gone up dramatically just in the last decade, where about a decade or more ago, oftentimes one Sherpa would be working with a client, and nowadays it is exceeding 1.5, even 2 Sherpa per individual person being guided up the mountain. For one, that contributes to a lot more people on the mountain, but also deviating away from personal responsibility or one learning the craft themselves, putting complete control in the hands of the guides and the high altitude porters. Now let's look at environmental strain and overcrowding. Everest has been struggling under the weight of overcrowding in terms of the garbage and the human waste that's been left behind. More waste, more pollution, more strain on the delicate ecosystem. One has to wonder what the climbers from the 1924 British expedition, George Mallory and Sandy Irvine, would think if they could walk to Everest Base Camp on the Nepal side, for instance, and see thousands of people working to get hundreds and hundreds of climbers to the summit. Now, it's no secret that Everest has been grappling with significant human waste and garbage issues for years, and the Nepal government has been doing what they can to try to remedy these problems. Each climbing season, hundreds of climbers, not including their guides and Sherpa support staff, spend 2 months on the mountain, and therefore put a strain, especially at base camp, but also in the camps higher up the mountain. In 2015, the Nepal government did a report that suggested that there was as much as 26,500 pounds of human waste on the mountain each season. That's about 12,000 some odd kilograms in weight. Most of it is carried off in buckets, and when one goes to base camp, you can literally see everywhere little miniature toilet tents, where every time a blue bucket at the bottom of that receptacle is filled up, it is carried to a human waste deposit area not too far from Everest Base Camp, left in a pit, and it biodegrades.
Though the human waste is being carried from those toilets by local porters who are paid very well for doing that, and they carry it to the side of the glacier and they dump it on the ground. It's not being treated in any way, and that human waste is leaking into the water supply. It's a terrible problem. It's a disgrace. These expeditions are well funded. The members of the expeditions have plenty of money.
Now, in terms of human waste higher up the mountain, above base camp, we did a report before the 2024 season that said how Nepal was implementing a system wherein climbers would be responsible to carry down their own human waste from higher upon the mountain. The future of this is that there's going to have to be a huge amount of self-regulation. In fact, there are also many instances of teams leaving their tents and discarded garbage up at the high camp, Camp 4, the South Col at 8,000 meters. And in that, a suggestion might be that the Nepal government provides free permits to a limited number of expeditions that are there specifically for the purposes of removing garbage from past expeditions. Now let's look at climate change and Everest's future. Climate change, of course, is another issue that Reinhold Messner and many mountaineers who came to the mountains for their pristine beauty are very concerned about. Now, this isn't trying to get into global warming as a political statement, but the fact is that the glaciers are receding rapidly, changing the nature of the Khumbu icefall. In 2009, I trekked up into the Gangotri Glacier in India, which is essentially the source of the Ganges River. I was with my friend Conrad Anker. We were doing a film with David Brancaccio and his producer John Seiseloff, and we were measuring how quickly the glacier was melting, the Gangotri Glacier. Scientists had estimated that the glacier would be completely melted in 50 years. Now, we did this film 15 years ago. Conrad and I, with some of the filming we did far up there at the base of Shivling and Meru Peak, were alarmed at how fast the water was flowing right at the top of the glacier. And fixing this certainly isn't relegated to just mountaineers. This is a change that all human beings on the planet are responsible for, but it does highlight how Reinhold Messner says that while the mountains seem eternal, they're highly sensitive to human impact, and it mirrors the broader global challenge of balancing human ambition with environmental protection. Messner is not the only one to think that mountain climbers have an obligation, an ethical duty to protect the mountains and the environment into which they are climbing. Now let's look at the bigger picture, authentic adventure versus instant gratification. Despite everything and all the changes that have taken place over the decades, Mount Everest still provides every single individual endeavoring to climb to the top of it with an opportunity to face incredible hardships, where suffering for a long period of time is unavoidable. So regardless of whether an individual is being guided up to the top or not, that human that gets to the summit of Mount Everest has gone through immense hardships in order to do that. It is not easy to climb Mount Everest, but what has changed is what is drawing the people there in the first place. With the rise of instant gratification evident everywhere on social media, it's possible that many people are drawn to Everest on the idea of getting that photograph from the summit and receiving some ego boost, some pat on the back.
It's as if they're standing at the foot of a mountain, and they have this abstract concept called impact that they want to have in the world, which is the summit. What they don't see is the mountain. I don't care if you go up the mountain quickly or slowly, but there's still a mountain. And so what this young generation needs to learn is patience. That some things that really, really matter, like love, a skill set, any of these things, all of these things take time.
One of my favorite quotes or sayings is from my friend Mark Sinnott, who's been on this channel many times, and he said it sometime after our 2019 expedition to search for the remains of Sandy Irvin on the north side of Mount Everest. And Mark said, adventure is when someone does not know the outcome. And it seems to a certain extent that sense of adventure may have been lost on Mount Everest and the 8,000 meter peaks with the overt commercialization of those mountains and the great numbers of people going there to climb them. Authentic adventure takes time, takes great effort, and a willingness to face and completely accept uncertainty or failure. So what's to be done? What would the call to action necessarily be for the future of Mount Everest? Well, we need to support governments like Nepal to continue imposing stricter and stricter rules on the environmental impact on the mountain. I haven't talked too much about the north side of Mount Everest, the Chinese-Tibetan side, because there are very strict rules being implemented there. It is a spotless side of the mountain with severe limitations on who is allowed to climb on the mountain. One needs to prove an extensive list of climbing experience in order to get a permit to go there. And they have to pre-approve whatever guiding companies are allowed to guide people on the mountain. So we know that there are many challenges facing Mount Everest and the 8,000 meter peaks, one of them being the overcrowding. In Nepal, it's more of a Wild West. Anybody can guide anybody up there. The restrictions on who is allowed to climb on the mountain are very little. So what would be suggested, but isn't expected at all, is that the Nepal government restricts the number of permits being given on the mountain in any given year. But that doesn't seem to be in the realm of possibility in the near future, with record number of climbers coming to the mountain each year.
When you look at a country like Nepal that is, still in the developing nation status, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. So having a multi-million-dollar revenue generator is important. And so one of the challenges that you see operating on the south side of Nepal, that's the opposite of the Chinese government, is that there's very little regulation and very little control of the number of people on the mountain or steps put in place to ensure the safety of the climbers and the workers there. And that's one of the main challenges faced within the industry right now.
One of the great impacts outside of the environmental impact of the mountain is that this has impacted greatly the Sherpa population of the Khumbu region. It has benefited them ultimately in that they have a new way to make income, and some of them are doing quite well, but it also puts them at great risk by going into that career. It's a very dangerous job to guide people, especially novices, on the mountain. And as these numbers of clients expands over the years, more and more inexperienced Sherpa, meaning high altitude porter or high altitude Sherpa, there's going to be less experience with those individuals, putting them at greater risk as well. In a fantastic interview with writer and a fellow colleague, Ben Ayers, he talks about what is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years on Mount Everest and beyond, is the possibility that some mountaineering organizations won't even recognize Everest summits as significant achievements. In terms of the hopes of the future, Ayers echoes earlier that it would be hoped that the regulations on the mountain, particularly on the Nepal side, that the regulations would become stricter with the introduction of some way to measure the competency of a client who was being hired for the mountain. Some proof that that person had mountaineering experience and wasn't getting off the couch, if you will, just for the opportunity for the summit selfie. One thing that is happening is that there is a shift happening now to less Western-oriented or Western-based expedition organizers to more Nepali-owned organizers. And now as more and more Nepali climbers, Sherpa climbers, are gaining experience and becoming certified guides, for instance, at the Khumbu Climbing Center, where I just had a short conversation with my friend Conrad Anker, who was instrumental in setting up this training for Sherpa. And Conrad said in our conversation that the gentlemen Sherpa who were on our expedition in 1999, when we were on the expedition to look for Mallory and Irvin, are being replaced by their own children, which is wonderful to see that they're going into the mountains with a great level of climbing. I will look forward to doing a future story about the Khumbu Climbing Center for this channel. Stay tuned on that one. We shall see what the coming years will bring. Will there be a change in the number of people or who is drawn to the mountain? Will Nepal institute stricter regulations? We have yet to see. We can only hope that the emphasis would be on protecting the mountain, limiting the number of people there, furthering the safety regulations for those individuals who are working there, who don't have as much of a choice in going. I hope you'll take some time to let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please take the time to subscribe and hit the bell icon. In the meantime, do a good deed. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one step at a time. Peace be with you.